Hello there and welcome. I'm Rev Nhien, founder of Evolving Enneagram. If you've been seeking a compassion-based, contemplative approach to Enneagram-informed transformation, you are certainly in the right place. This is where contemplation meets the Enneagram. We are in week 4 of a 12-week Sunday Talk series based on the theme, The Care of the Soul. And the whole series is inspired by my new book, The Enneagram of the Soul, a 40-day spiritual companion for the 9 types. So, this week's talk is titled Gratitude, a Causative Energy, 9 Ways We Are Generative. So, I'm going to do this in 3 parts. In part 1, I'd like to actually open with some personal sharing. So if you're not into that, you can just skip to part 2. In part 2, I want to talk about gratitude not as like an emotional reaction to outer circumstances, but rather its own causative energy from which creation, abundance can flow. And then in part 3, I want to go around the circle of the Enneagram and explore what it looks like when we are all in this state of gratitude around the circle. And this gratitude flows into generosity, not generosity that depletes us, but a generosity that comes from our own overflow or our own abundance. So, let's begin. So, I'd like to open with some personal sharing. Once upon a time, I was a total ingrate. I would say that my family, my siblings, my parents were all like, God, like all Nhien does is talk about what's wrong. Uh, and I would say in my romantic relationships, same thing. In fact, a lot of relationships ended, I think, because the guys were like, when I say guys, like in sequence, it's like I don't think I can be good enough for you. Like that was a repeat thing that I experienced in relationship. And I was very aware that my attitude was one of critiquing, of improving, of correcting, of noticing not what was there, but always like what was wrong in all my relationships. And I would say, even and especially my relationship to myself. So there was that constant task mastering where I wasn't good enough in any moment. I would always notice like where the defect was. And frankly, living like that was completely exhausting, not just for myself, I'm sure for others. And that's actually, I've spent more of my life like that than I have not like that. So I start from this orientation that gratitude practice feels like it's coming from a place of a learned practice. And so I hope that if you're finding struggles with gratitude practice, you could be like, oh, I'm not the only one. You are definitely not the only person. So today I want to talk about a specific time in my life when gratitude became like a pivotal point for me. So, as many of you already know, I used to be an attorney in San Francisco. While I was practicing law, I got the call to ministry, and then I started to prepare to leave. And when I did, I stepped down from my salaried associate position at the San Francisco law firm and became an independent contractor. And all was really well for a while. I was getting paid the same amount that like other attorneys were getting paid, but I had all this flexibility to take classes toward ministerial school. It was quite amazing, actually. And then one day it was not. One day the market just tanked, the dot-com bubble burst, and salaried attorneys were not getting enough work. So they could not justify keeping an independent contractor on. And so for the first time in my life, right, Stanford law grad, I had been told, the world is my oyster. I could always find a job. I jumped around in jobs all the time. And for the first time, I was out of work. They did not have work to give to me. And then on top of that, um, I was dating and it just kind of, I met someone and had this, looking back, fairly irrational idea that I should move in with him after knowing him like a month and a half. And so all of this kind of came around the same time. And what happened was I ended up in his San Francisco apartment instead of my beautiful Marin home, which I offered up for rent. So someone was renting my house so that I could pay my mortgage. So I'm in this little apartment in San Francisco. Moving into the apartment meant I had crossed the Golden Gate Bridge, so I was away from my spiritual community. So I didn't have that as a resource. Then I started to spiral into lack thinking of like, oh my gosh, I can't justify paying the money for the toll for the bridge to go across the bridge to go see my community. So I wasn't steeped in it. And then I had my car in San Francisco. If you know anything about it, is really, really hard to park your car. There's street cleaning, and you have to like follow the map of street cleaning. If you don't, you get a ticket. I think in like a month of being there, I think I got like 3 or 4 tickets. So I move in with this guy I barely know. We're not getting along at all. We're just missing each other. We just can't like communicate in a way that makes sense, and I'm miserable. He is a graduate student, so has barely any money. The place is freezing, and I didn't realize how much like I just needed like basics, like just to be warm. And it was so sad. And so there I was, just like not knowing what to do, and I was spiraling. So it's like, oh, okay, Stanford Law, right? I'm sending out these resumes, and nobody is even responding. I mean, I used to have recruiters looking for me, and I'm like, nobody's even responding. What is happening? And so that spiral of an old tape of like, what's wrong with me? And I can't get anything right. And, all these things that were like down, down, down. And then when the parking tickets came, I would be like, oh, another parking ticket. I keep getting, and I was saying this, I keep getting parking tickets. I kept saying things like, I can't afford this. And some of that negative talk was so habitual based on my particular history and past, my family upbringing. Like it was really hard for me to see it. And so things seemed to just get worse and worse for a few months. And then, I don't know, by the grace of God, right? One day I decide, you know what? I'm going to watch the movie The Secret, even though that movie, which talks about the law of attraction, is a little bit materialistic for my taste in its focus. Just watching that and thinking about the power of consciousness, the power of my consciousness to impact my life experience. Like, I was like, oh, duh, gratitude. I decided to stop for a moment, like, just to stop applying for jobs, to stop everything I was doing and just meditate and pray and do a gratitude journal. Like I'm talking just stream of consciousness, like I'm grateful for, and boy was it hard in the beginning because I would say I'm grateful for a roof over my head, and in my head I'll be like, but it's a cold, cold room I'm in. So I just really reorient, not toward what I was missing, but toward what I had right there, right in that moment. And not sending out my resume because I was like sending out from this energy of like, ugh, it's not going to happen anyway, right? So I just stopped all that. I took a break, all that, to re-establish my consciousness and a consciousness of having. And so I did this like almost continuous. Like that's all I did for like 2.5 days, and I could start to see this difference of like, okay, there I am again, you know? And then lo and behold, suddenly I get a phone call from my housemate. We actually co-own this house together, a friend of mine and I. She's like, the renter needs to leave. And so I wouldn't have violated the lease, but this person needed to leave early. And so rather than seeing it as, oh my God, another lack, I was like in this place of, like gratitude. I'm like, I am so grateful for this. This is my opportunity to reestablish myself in my community, to restore my faith, like just to deepen that. And so I took that leap of faith because I was in a state of gratitude. And I moved back into my place, not knowing what direction. I'd say within like a day of that, I got a job offer. It wasn't like the dream job. It was something that would help the bleeding at this time. And I knew that coming in. And then I don't want to, it's like so many gifts in the story, but it was like that. And it was just like started to build this momentum of gratitude. And then the next thing unfolded. I went to a vision quest that even like further steeped me in my clarity of mission. And when I came back from this vision quest that someone gave me a scholarship to go to, it was like everything had changed. I could feel it. I could feel my readiness. I came back and I got this stable, like document review legal job, which is normally like a very low level lawyering job. I was like, yes. And I was so grateful. I was just like beaming gratitude. And I remember how it impacted my work. I came to work enthusiastically, and I remember like the guy next to me and was like, I couldn't get another job, and he's like surfing the internet the whole time instead of doing his work, and I'm like working 2 to 3 times faster, more productively than he is, partly because I was just like grateful. I get in this momentum of gratitude where I was like grateful for everything that I had there. When they had to downsize, uh, like 100 attorneys working on this massive case. And there were attorneys who were hired well before me. And normally they do it based on seniority. But guess what? 12 people were kept on, and I was one of them. And this job helped me to come back financially, stabilize myself. And in the midst of that, I started to really embody this like sense of like having. And it was at that point when I knew I was ready and I would take another leap of faith and I would sign a lease at Unity Institute and Seminary on the grounds. And I was ready to actually move forward on my dream for ministry, not quite knowing fully financially how I would make it. And then clearly, like I made it. And there's so many beautiful stories around like surprise um, tithes that churches sent to me as a seminary student that helped me move through all of this. But it all started with this shift in consciousness that the practice of writing my gratitudes so that I could feel into this of this having rather than this atmosphere, this inner atmosphere of what is missing from me or my life began to, well, like from then on, gratitude has been a core part of my practice. And whenever I feel a sense of lack, like there isn't enough, I practice gratitude overflowing, moving into generosity. And so, with this, I want to turn to practice 5 in the book, which is on page 61 and 62 of the Enneagram of the Soul. Gratitude, a causative energy. From my book, I quote Wayne Dyer: abundance is not something we acquire, it is something we tune into. In the language of letting go, one of America's most renowned addiction and recovery self-help authors, Melody Beattie, writes, gratitude unlocks the fullness of life. It turns what we have into enough and more. It turns denial into acceptance, chaos to order, confusion to clarity. It can turn a meal into a feast, a house into a home, a stranger into a friend. Centuries before her, Christian mystic Meister Eckhart counseled, if the only prayer you ever say in your entire life is thank you, it will be enough. Before him, the ancient Roman philosopher Cicero taught that gratitude is not only the greatest of the virtues, but the parent of all the others. So those of you who've been following me for a while know that I repeat this lesson on gratitude, but it's so primary. Gratitude is not only the greatest of the virtues, but the parent of all the others. Consider that there's something about the fullness of being from which our virtues have a foundation for flowing, right? In unity, we teach that gratitude is a powerful causative energy, not a reactive emotion. When we practice gratitude as an intentional practice, we align our mind with the divine mind, allowing us to experience ourselves as co-creative participants in life's eternal and abundant flow. So that's from my book. But I want to pause here to say that it's important to note then, as we're aligning consciousness, that aligning with this sense of flow, that the gratitude not just be intellectual, right? Like if I'm writing a gratitude journal, I'm taking the time to actually feel and receive that sense of having, right? That's really vital here. The other piece about this is this idea that gratitude is causative rather than reactive, right? Yes, sure. Like if you're going to bring me flowers, I love flowers. I'm going to like naturally automatically feel this emotive like sense of gratitude, and that's wonderful. But what I'm talking about is something that we have like conscious control over, right? That we can actually exercise as a practice. And related to this notion of it being causative, I want to share that from the Bible. I've always wondered about this notion around like why we are not supposed to curse or curse God, right? Like the words where we talk about cussing or cursing, damning. And at Unity, we interpret the Bible metaphysically. And so I really have this like powerful sense of, oh, well, this makes sense. Because to curse something, to damn it is to speak negative words over something, right? And to practice gratitude is to like sprinkle blessing over our life circumstance in a way, right? Like here is my circumstance. There was my circumstance sitting in this like cold apartment, miserable and not getting along with my partner. It was just like if I was going to recycle it, which I was doing for a while, which is like, oh, this sucks. And why am I getting a parking ticket? And I don't like this at all. And I wish things were better. Oh my God. It was just like repeating and recycling itself. And I was just spiraling down. And then when I started gratitude journaling, it was like my words, my feelings were like watering the soil of my consciousness so that it was like fertile, full. And from that fullness, we know it's like that fertility of soil, like that's generative. Like that's creative energy, right? So I want to take this moment to invite you to consider that whatever the circumstance of your life is right now, like however awful or great it might be, that gratitude practice can be practiced independently of your life circumstances. The gratitude journaling can help to evoke the state of having and overflowing, right? And the further down the spiral you are, the more you might need that practice. But irrespective of your circumstance right now, you might sprinkle this blessing of surety and having, even if your life feels like relatively good right now, you might sprinkle it over our whole global situation, right? That is not just for you, that you issue this praise over this moment rather than consternation and what's missing and what it's changing and all that as a baseline of consciousness. Now, I want to be clear, and I write about this in the book. Gratitude is different from positively reframing situations, which is a common default among certain Enneagram types, especially the positive outlook types, types 2, 7, and 9. So while seeing the positives of a situation is a helpful step in coping with life's difficulties, it's important to guard against gratitude practice becoming this like spiritual bypass. Gratitude as a spiritual practice is not about avoiding painful situations or repressing our negative feelings, right? Rather, it's about recognizing that as we encounter even the most trying of circumstances, we can be like the biblical Jacob who wrestled with the angel, enduring until he received a blessing. And the blessing, again, doesn't start, at least, as a change of circumstance. We don't look to that to change our state of mind. We alter our state of mind in order to support the change of circumstance, right? So we open to the spirit within us that knows that, yes, good is here. This too is good at the absolute level of being. And I understand that that's not an easy practice, but I can tell you in that moment, sitting in that apartment, it was like the furthest thing I thought was worthy of my attention, gratitude. And yet somehow by some miracle, like life gave me that like invitation to say, try this. And perhaps I only tried it because nothing else was working, because I was so desperate, right? And we might just be desperate for our world to have more plenty for all in our world. So in closing, I want to offer reflections on what grateful generosity might look like through each of the 9 types on the Enneagram. And you might even invite yourself to consider this as like 9 different points within you, within one person. And so here now, first taking this moment to go, whew, might I consider gratitude as a spiritual practice, intentional, as a way that I water or sprinkle blessing onto the soil of consciousness, that I might align with the truth of love and abundance as the very fabric and nature of existence. Breathing in a state of grateful generosity. One's experience rests in the divine perfection of the moment and inspire acceptance and serenity in all, through all. Twos harvest the cornucopia of love and humbly give from what they first allow themselves to receive. Threes experience their pearl-like being and mirror the exquisite truth in others in a way that draws their unique presence and purpose forth. Fours take to heart the sweetness of joy as well as of sorrow, and creatively bring to life the full spectrum of our shared humanity. Fives sense their connection to a boundless and interconnected energy field and give freely of their compassionate wisdom. Sixes, see through eyes of faith and lend an excess of encouragement and fortitude to every situation they encounter. Sevens are fully sated within the here and now and share the joy of contentment with others. Eights become more fiercely tender with the world and offer the gift of their childlike awe and wonder. Nines embrace all points of view and generously contribute their unique voice and grounded vitality. So I hope today, if you, like me, might have started with a different perspective of gratitude practice, maybe as something that we should do, or even, some more like fundamental Christian perspectives that somehow suggest we should be grateful to God, as if like God needed our appreciation, or that our good or our blessing would be dependent on that. To see it from this more allegorical or metaphysical perspective, that this is really sort of a parable or myth talking about pointing us toward the underlying reality that gratitude gets us in alignment with the infinite, with infinite love and power and blessing. And as we align ourselves to this gratitude practice, we are in prayer, right? As an act of prayer, aligning ourselves with God from that perspective that says prayer is not to change God, but to change ourselves. And so we might hear the teachings from the world's spiritual and religious traditions on the sense of being content, not as resignation, but as something pointing toward the spirit of gratitude. I'll close with words from Lao Tzu. Be content with what you have. Rejoice in the way things are. When you realize nothing is lacking, the whole world belongs to you. Namaste, and thank you.